So now it's a great pleasure to introduce Charles Middleton. So Charlie holds a GED from University of Alabama and an LLM in tax law from the New York University. He's an experienced international tax lawyer who served inter alia as the former head of global tax planning for Walmart, as the head of tax department of Financial Guarantee Insurance Corporation, which is a General Electric capital company, and General Electric Asset Management, as well as the head of tax department of Caterpillar Financial. Charlie will present a case study entitled General Electric, the Enron train wreck in slow motion. So Charlie, the floor is yours.
Okay, so GE and Enron is basically Thomas Cook all over again, and we see this time and time again, that if you want to understand corporate fraud and you want to find it and you want to understand it looking backwards, you have to understand accounting. And I think a lot of lawyers don't understand accounting, right? They just kind of say, I do not want to know that. Please don't bother me, you know. But it's worth the effort. You know, understanding income statements, understanding balance sheets, understanding how, in order for something to get to the balance sheet, it generally has to go through the income statement. So if you have a fraud like Wirecard or Parmalat, where a company is found to not have assets that they say they have, it's not just the balance sheet that's the problem. It's also the income statement. They inflated their earnings for years and years and years. It had to create an asset on the balance sheet, and that's why they got a fraudulent asset on the balance sheet. And when you discover that there may be fraudulent assets on the balance sheet, you need to go back and look at the income statement. I'm really more commenting on the prior presentation than mine, but it's such a common theme with these frauds. And similarly, the management compensation is such a common theme with Thomas Cook, with GE, with Enron. I worked at both GE and Enron, I worked at GE when GE was trying to acquire an Enron business. So I didn't work at Enron, but I worked with Enron in an acquisition. So I saw both companies up close, and I was surprised to notice some parallels. Right, we think of GE as being a management failure, but not a fraud. And we think of Enron as being a fraud. I think it's a slippery slope. I think that the accounting aggressiveness at Enron was just orders of magnitude worse than the accounting aggressiveness at GE and the accounting of aggressiveness at Thomas Cook, right? I mean, Thomas Cook essentially said, all those expenses, well, just ignore those. We're just going to make those go away. See how profitable we were if you ignore our expenses, right? It wasn't a crime. It doesn't sound like one. I mean, all you had to do was read to page 120 and understand what you were reading, right? But a lot of people don't. Another thing that popped to mind vis-a-vis the prior presentation was, in America, the theory on securities regulation has to do with disclosure, right? The government doesn't tell you what you can and can't do generally. I mean, obviously you can't commit crimes, but the way that investors are protected is with disclosures. So it is fairly reasonable for someone to say, hey, if you didn't read Thomas Cook's financial statements and you didn't understand what it means to write off 150 million in expenses, then, well, you're just not a very good investor. You know, the disclosure was there. Now obviously it was buried and it shouldn't be buried. But I mean, my point is that practitioners, students, people who care about how corporations work need to understand the accounting. It's critical. And I'm a guy who never took accounting, right? I didn't take a day of accounting. I went to law school, and then I passed the CPA once I was working, because you just have to know it. Anyway, so my presentation has to do with Enron and GE. We all know that Enron blew up in 2001 because it was discovered that they had used off-balance sheet entities to hide financial problems and to inflate their earnings. So the Enron, let me just go through the slide real quick. So both Enron and GE were highly admired by the business press. They were both on the cover Fortune and other magazines as these are the best companies in the world, right? And so the business press got it extraordinarily wrong. They didn't understand the businesses that they were reporting on. The financial analysts didn't understand the businesses that they were analyzing, or they did understood and they lied about it. So you've got these staggeringly, lauded companies that were delivering rock solid financial performance. GE was beating earnings by a small amount every quarter, every year, right? And it was delivering earnings which don't really occur in nature, right? The way that the business cycles work is that sometimes you do well, sometimes you do poorly, sometimes there's inflation. And GE said, well, we've got all these different businesses and we're a conglomerate and we're managing it so that we don't actually, that make all the risk go away and we just have a steadily growing growth, right? And lots of financial analysts, to their credit, said, we don't really understand that, right? It's a black box. And that was good criticism because it was a black box. And it was also a lot of smoke and mirrors and a lot of dishonesty. So when I worked for GE, I was involved in a very small part of earnings management. I'll tell you about that in a second. But so the point is, you've got these sort of parallels between these very highly regarded companies that are got complex accounting, and then one day we all discover that it was all smoke and mirrors, and they get seriously punished by the market. So the Enron one, it's worth understanding how, one aspect of financial accounting that's worth understanding is how you consolidate the operations of an entity, right? You've got Enron, a company at the top, but there's hundreds, if not thousands, of subsidiaries and partnerships and joint ventures and all kinds of various entities below it. And which ones are included in the consolidation and which are not included in the consolidation is a decision that accountants have to make. And so when you say Enron, does that include their 49% interest in this company in Namibia? Does it include, and so accounting rules are applied to make those decisions. And the rules that Enron was cheating with was off balance sheet entities, right? They would say, if we got something that's losing money, then let's just put it into a company that's not part of our consolidation. And yeah, it was criminal. But they, a legitimate accounting firm was saying it all works, right? And legitimate law firms were saying it all works. Now, the way that you get a legitimate accounting firm and a legitimate law firm to say something works when it's fraudulent is as follows. You say, hey, law firm, we're doing this. Does it work? And the law firm says, well, we will give you an opinion that says it works if we can assume the following 10 things. 1, you're not being fraudulent. 2, all of your transactions are at bona fide arm's length, right, et cetera. So the law firms assume the problem away. And so the lawyers will say, yeah, if we assume the problem away, then there's no problem. And here's our legal opinion that says that. I'm frankly surprised that Enron's law firm, Vincent and Elkins, survived. Their accounting firm obviously did not. But when we think of Enron, we think of a fraud. But I think it makes more sense to think of it as a continuum. Enron's cheating was worse than GE's and maybe worse than Thomas Cook's, or I don't worse than Wirecards. There's all these fraudulent things that a company can do, and the sophisticated ones, like all the names that we've mentioned, have lawyers and accountants who are signing off on it. I mean, in the case of Enron, a whistleblower came and she said, I think that the company's going to blow up. The CEO said, thank you so much. She walked out the office and he called his law firm and said, we've got to fire her. right? I mean, that's how it works. Anyway, so the war story for me with Enron was when GE was trying to buy Enron Wind, the sellers said, the Enron lawyers said, hey, we're going to sell you the stock of this company. And I said, that doesn't make any sense, because when you buy the stock of a company, you buy its liabilities, including its tax liability. And they said, no, don't worry. We've deconsolidated that company because of the tax and accounting rules say it's not actually part of Enron, so it doesn't take those liabilities don't come with it. My point is that even after the company was blowing up, the lawyers were saying with a completely straight face, yeah, but these rules protect us, right? So I mean, that was Enron. GE, in my opinion, is the same story. That GE, there's a great book on GE called Lights Out, and it talks about how GE's management had a culture of, we deliver the numbers no matter what. There's no excuses. There's, either you did it or you didn't, and it doesn't matter how you did it. And so, but it does matter how you did it, right? Because your earnings quality gets progressively worse and worse. If you accelerate tomorrow's earnings to today, at a certain point, you get to a point where you just can't do it anymore. The small piece of the puzzle that I encountered was I worked for this company called Financial Guarantee Insurance Company, and in response to frauds that had happened before, the accounting rules were changed to say that if you have derivatives, which is a contract like a swap, or an interest rate swap, or some other contract which is designed to change the performance of a financial product, if that on certain circumstances you have to mark those contracts, those assets and liabilities to market. And GE discovered, well, we can use those rules in our not as they were intended, but to generate a bunch of income. And I was the tax guy, so I said, hey, I don't think we should pay tax on this income because we haven't made it, right? We have an asset that has gained value and a derivative which has lost value. If we mark up the asset but we don't mark down the liability, then we're cheating, right? We're accelerating our income. We're using the rules inappropriately. And I went to my boss and said, hey, I don't think we should do this. And the company basically scratched its chin for about a year and said, thanks for raising that, and nothing happened. Nothing bad happened to me. Nothing bad happened. The company recognized the income and we sort of ignored it. The takeaway, and I forgot to mention this takeaway on the prior Enron slide, is these situations, as they're going on, tens, dozens, hundreds of people know that it's happening, right? And they're letting it happen. And these are not bad people. These people, go to church. They love their mama, right? They're decent human beings, but they do these fundamentally dishonest things, right? Enron had, when I walked the halls of Enron, it was Harvard Law School, London School of Economics. So they had very smart, hardworking people there who were cheating, and they were causing their company to blow up, but they weren't putting their hand up because they knew if they put their hand up, bad things would happen to their career. A lot of people ran on it. Nobody talked about it. My final example is Walmart, and it's and the point is, we think of Enron and think this was this fraud that inevitably brought down this huge company because fraudsters always get caught, and and the companies get destroyed by fraud. It's not true. It's an exception to the rule. I mean, I think that the vast amount of fraud goes undetected. The vast amount of corporate criminals get away with it, right? These people aren't dumb, right? These people went to Harvard Law School, right? These people, are playing the odds, right? When Costa said, that these funds are a cost of doing business, frequently they are a cost of doing business. That 800 billion in fines that was paid, right? The vast majority of them are paid by companies that are still solvent, that are still, going on, and their management is getting their big bonuses. Anyway, the Walmart story is Walmart paid some bribes in Mexico and India and Brazil. And a whistleblower told them about it, and then the management had to make a decision: do we tell the SEC or do we not? And so Walmart went to its law firm, and the law firm said, well, we need to tell the SEC, but first let's perform an internal investigation, and and then let's figure out what our obligations are on an ongoing basis. And meanwhile, Sarbanes-Oxley, an American law which is passed after Enron, says that the officers have to attest that the financial statements of the company are accurate and that the controls are adequate to discover frauds, right? So obviously the controls were not adequate because they had been paying bribes with corporate money that was, on the income statements. And so the controls were not adequate, but officers had to attest that the controls were adequate, right? So Walmart hired 30 law firms to represent the 30 officers that knew that they were lying to the SEC with every single Sarbanes-Oxley form that they filed, right? So 6 years after they discovered it, right, after a whistleblower told them, obviously they knew about it, right? They were doing it. Right? They went to the SEC and they said, hey, we did this thing. We paid some bribes, it was a long time ago. And so the SEC starts investigating. 7 years go by, and the Walmart and the SEC settle in 2019 for $250 million. At the same time, they disclosed that they had paid $800 million in legal fees. So, it cost them $250 million in fines and $800 million in legal fees. But it was absolutely worth it, right? I mean, Walmex was a phenomenally profitable subsidiary, and it grew as a result of paying bribes. If you want to open a store, it can be difficult, but if you pay a bribe, it's a lot easier. And the same is true in a lot of places. Russia springs to mind. So Walmart paid the bribes, then it hid the crime. 30 senior executives hid the crime. The handout which I sent to Costa was an article called Whistleblower versus Anti-Whistleblower, which is there's a tie-in to Nestle. Nestle's former CFO was Walmart's former CFO for the international division. And Nestle hired her after it was clear that she had been one of the 30 who had kept this Walmart crime secret, right? That Nestle rewarded this woman, Wandeling Martello, for keeping this fraud secret. So, it's very easy for us to take to think, good things happen to good, honest people, and bad things happen to bad, dishonest people. Yeah, it's not true. Ken Lay was a bad guy. Bad things happened to him. He was the CEO of Enron. But I mean, plenty of good things happen to bad people who keep these crimes secret. It is a pretty rational decision, and that's why so many people do it. Yeah, that's my presentation.
Thank you very much. So it was a great presentation, and I think you touched so many interesting concepts and notions. Crime paid is very important one. I think when you said all the people that knew about that, they didn't do anything, was I was thinking Hannah Arendt's banality of evil, and this is happening in the corporate world so much, and the inadequacy of course, the controls, but also the state response. I was discussing this morning with my student the problem of power profiling, and that the CEO, they are under the effect of winner effect. They think that nothing can happen to them, and we are letting they believe this because we are not sanctioning them. because every time there is a scandal, every time there's something, nobody goes to jail. So they of course, they are creating, they generate this power profile that they can risk because nothing will happen to them. So the inadequacy of state response has to be addressed. I think is one of the most important things. And then there is also a link to the previous presentation when you were speaking about the complexity of the accounting system, but you also raised the issue, the role of professional enablers in these crimes and the hyper specializations that is going, and Don is saying that the Wirecard CEO is going to try on December. Wow, this is an exception. So we can have this in the question and answer time. So the extreme specialization of professional skills that in a way, in a way toward transparency, and transparency is fundamental for the establishing of a healthy organization, whatever it is, a government organization, business organization, and that's it. And the result, what is it? And is the distortion of reality. And again, we were discussing today in the lecture about what I learned. One of the things I learned during the project, the Whistling at the Fake. And what I learned was that this information is not mainly generated through the dissemination of fake information, but the simplest way to do it through the suppression of information. And this is what's happening in the corporate world. And I think what's happening with Enron and General Electric are emblematic examples of this distortion of reality, the dire consequences that the distortion of reality can generate. So thank you so much.